our very specialized tutorial using Photoshop to remove one person's face or head from their body and stick it on somebody else. So here we have a fairly iconic image in cinema. It is the one of the shots from, you guessed it, Titanic, and you know, there are the actors, Kate and Leonardo, but I really think that Kate and Chuck would be a much better fit, don't you? So let's make this happen. A lot of your work begins even before you hit Photoshop, and it really comes to finding a good photo. So it took me a little while to even find one of our good friend Chuck Norris that was not three quarters or his full face looking straight onto the camera. So I was able to get a profile. It's not the same profile that DiCaprio has here. So we're going to have to work with it a little bit. Life is not always perfect. Let me give you a few Photoshop tips though before we get further into our work. You will do your work in Photoshop by opening up both images. So save them first, then go to File, Open, and open up each image. So you have both to work with. Side by side will work well for our demo. And then what we're going to do is use a series of tools. Now, your Photoshop setup may vary from this one. So if your toolbars don't match, what you can do is in Photoshop, go to Window, Workspace, and you can just go to Essentials if you want, or you could say Reset Essentials, and that should restore it to something much more similar to what I'm working with here. The other thing that's really important to notice is if you look closely at the left-hand toolbar, and you will notice that most of the tools have a small triangle beneath them. What that means is that there's another tool hidden there. So you'll notice if I click and hold here, there are actually three tools there. Look at the brush, click and hold, there are two tools. I'm sorry, under clone stamp, there are two tools. Same with the brush, four tools. So if I'm referencing the brush and you can't find it, look in the same position on the toolbar, click and hold, and you're likely to find the brush tool there, and that will bring any frustration you might feel, bring that down a lot. Alright, so let's begin. The tool we're going to use to move part of Norris's face over to our Titanic image is known as the magnetic lasso tool. It's a great tool for selecting. It's under the lasso tool, so again I'll click and hold, and there's magnetic lasso. You can get a good view of it there. To me it looks like a coat hanger with a magnet on it. Now the magnetic lasso works like this. It allows you to click and put individual points in place where you want them to go. So you can take control like that, but when you get to an area where the edge is more defined, like the profile here, I'm not clicking anymore. I'm just dragging and letting the magnetic lasso do the work of selecting for me. You do have to be pretty faithful to the edge that you want to select, but the nice thing is this sets you free from having to be absolutely perfect. When you get back to the beginning, you click to close the loop, and there your image is selected. Now if you realize you selected the wrong thing, no problem, go up to Select on the top menu bar and choose Deselect. Now, before I show you how to move the face over there, a little bit more about magnetic lasso. If, as you are working and clicking, you realize you make a mistake and you need to go backwards, no problem. Just push the delete key, and I'm pushing delete, 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 delete. You'll notice it's taking back one point at a time, and it gets me on track, back on track. Now, if things just go haywire completely, right? It's just a mess. There's no saving this. Press the escape key in the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard, and your magnetic lasso is gone. And you can start over. So let me do my selection. Now, while I select, I'm looking at DiCaprio's face, and I've decided I'm going to try and keep his ear, but I want some of Norris's hair in there because it will make the blending go a little bit more smoothly when I get over there. So bear with me while I just finish going around back to where I started. And there I've got my selection. Now, if you've used Photoshop before, there are other tools we could employ here. Quick mask, some of the selection tools, but at this point, I want to keep this a fairly straightforward exercise for you. So we're just going to take this selection, go to Edit, Copy, click over to our other image, and go to Edit, Paste. All right, and there's his face. Obviously, first problem, it's too big. So let's start resizing. The resize tool you can find under the Edit menu and go to Free Transform. You can also do Command or Control T for the keyboard shortcut. So now I've got a box. Now, when you're resizing in almost every graphics program, if you just begin to resize, you're going to throw the proportion off. Let me undo that real quick. But if you hold down the Shift key while you resize, you keep the image in proportion. So use the Shift key. We will end up distorting Norris's face in a minute, but for now we want to keep it in proportion. So one thing that helps me when I'm trying to match faces is to overlay the eyes. Excuse me, and here's how I'm going to do that. If you look over to the right on the Layers menu, you'll see I'm on Layer 4. That's Chuck Norris. If I click the eyeball and I weren't in edit mode, it would actually make his face disappear. I could click it again and bring it back. The reason Layer 4 is important is that I want to change the opacity. This will make Norris's face that I cut out somewhat transparent. So, get it. So I'm going to have it about 71%. This then allows me to move it, and I can line up the eyeballs and start to shift click and resize, and I can see where his eyes are lining up. But I realize I also need to rotate. Now look at my cursor on the Titanic image. Let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see this. If I move the cursor onto one of the corner handles, it allows me to resize. If I move it just off that a little bit, the arrow curves. This means I can rotate the image. This is going to be a much better fit then, as we now shift in. And just be patient with yourself, folks. Click and drag. Now you'll see I'm starting to distort this a little bit. I've got the eyes somewhat aligned. Let's see how that works. I'm going to pull him out a little bit here. Now I'm going to go back to my layers palette on the right side, change the opacity back to 100%, back to the top menu bar, look in the upper right, I'm going to click on this checkbox and drop his face in there. It's too big, so I need to make some further edits. So I'm back to my edit menu, transform, and I want to use the warp tool. Check this out, the warp tool is great. It's dropped a grid on Chuck that I can then use and start to bend his face in. This is different than a pure resize because it's kind of like a little plastic surgery. Don't go there, people. This is Chuck Norris. I can start cleaning this up and tuck his face in so it fits a little bit naturally onto DiCaprio. Nothing is perfect here. And click the check mark when you like what you've got. I'm going to use the move tool just to move his face up a little bit more. And again, back to edit, transform, warp. Now, you've got to be patient with yourself, folks. This takes time. All right. And there we have our basic Chuck Norris face, drop and drag onto DiCaprio. Let's go to view, fit on screen. Deselect this. And now you can see we've got a decent placement. It's still pretty creepy. There's a lot I could do here to clean this up. One thing I might consider would be to color sample the shadow here and then grab my brush, top menu bar, play around with opacity, bring it way down, grab a nice soft brush, and get on that layer. Start to just gently darken the edge of his face. I don't want to just color it black. I just want to add some shadows in there so that it's more of a match. With more time and as you learn more about Photoshop, some of the other techniques you could employ might be under Image and Adjustments, Brightness Contrast. Drag that out of the way. Because compare his face with some pink tones to her face that's a brighter, almost white yellow. So I want to move that slider for brightness over and brighten him up a little bit. Still keep some contrast in there. And then maybe I'll go back to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and see what I can get with just a little less pink. Maybe lighten them up. Like that. I actually picked a tough one for myself with that half backlit going into the sunset view. So to review, your key here is to select a good picture first. Check out my tutorial that I put in the comment section that links to how to make good image choices using Google Images. You want to go for a medium or large. If this had been a tiny picture of Chuck's face, it would be all pixelated. That is all fuzzy now that we've resized it. Picking the right picture makes the difference at the very beginning. Then it's magnetic lasso tool. That's your friend. That and a steady hand and a lot of patience and a willingness to try and restart if you need to, and take your time with your image. Once you're done and you're happy with what you've got, I want you to do two things. Go to good old Save As and make sure that you're saving as a Photoshop file. By doing that, you can always come back and work on this more. After you've saved it as a Photoshop file, go back to File, Save As again, save it as a JPEG. Then you've got what you need to put it on a website, to email it to someone, to put it on Facebook. Oh, the fun is endless, my friends. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this has given you a useful taste of the power behind Photoshop, and you guys have a great day. Take it easy.